that China, under this one rumor, this one theory, why maybe China would have done this then. So yeah, so like the first thing you mentioned, female infanticide and selective abortions that are biased in favor of having boys, because like I said, between that, just things you mentioned and just kind of a cultural prejudice
Yes.
for having boys. Yeah, so here's the issue is that you end up with right now both China and India has this problem too.
Yeah, I heard.
Even though the selective abortion is supposedly illegal, it still happens. So, and the infanticide, same thing. So what you end up with is right now in both countries, respectively, you have 1 million excess men to women.
Welcome. You are listening to the Solvable Mysteries Podcast, episode number 26. My name is Juras, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Glenn Highcove. How are you feeling, man? How are you doing on this Saturday? Or Friday evening, I'm sorry.
Yeah, almost Saturday for me. Saturday for you, for sure. Yeah, I'm doing okay. Kind of scared about this virus stuff. It's the end of the world. So I think it's time for us to talk about the scary stuff that everybody is either talking about or trying not to talk about.
Exactly. Today we're going to be talking about, I pretty much think all of our audience already knows, the coronavirus outbreak that is pretty much devastating China at this moment. Like, we have this map that a lot of our, colleagues here on YouTube also use, and the numbers are quite interesting. Like, from what we can see at today's, by the way, just to get like some sort of a timestamp on this, today's the 8th of February, right? If I'm not mistaken, because like I'm not really good with months in English. So it's like,
Yep.
Yeah, the 8th of February. And the total confirmed cases is at we can say like 35,000 pretty much around the world. And if I'm not mistaken, because I'm checking on these numbers every day now, if I'm not mistaken, yesterday we had like 32,000. So, but obviously, I could be a little bit off. So, the official numbers, we will get into how credible these official numbers are. But the official numbers as of the 8th of February is that we have 35,000 basically infected cases. We have a total of 724 total deaths that had occurred, as well as we also started getting some recovery numbers. Have you noticed that we only started getting the recovery numbers like, I'd say, 3 or 4 days ago?
Yeah. What's crazy is that death number is like a good 120 higher than even like I watched another YouTuber's video, and it was only from a day ago. So It's already gone up like another 124 people since his video, and that was already going like fast. And those numbers, they think are probably low.
That's
versus the truth.
I mean, we will discuss that shortly. So for me, the interesting part, like, I know that the Chinese numbers, like if you're talking about credibility about these numbers, the total death numbers, like the numbers from China mainland, like, you obviously cannot take those numbers as fact, because we all know like that at this point, because of politics and trying to protect your economy as best you can, the Chinese government is most likely not disclosing the actual numbers, as well as the numbers can't be correct because there are not enough test kits, and people are dying all the time without even getting tested, so that automatically ends up not showing the actual numbers for the people who died but not got tested or waited in line to get tested, and so on and so forth. But that's gonna come up a little bit later on in the show. The interesting thing about the total death number is the total death from other areas, right? Not from China. So that's the scariest part for me personally, because those numbers are actually credible. It's not like countries like Germany or France would like lie about these things, right? You would expect, right? So we're right now seeing a death in Hong Kong and one death in the Philippines. If have there been any more deaths outside of China mainland? Do you know? I'm gonna quickly check the Wikipedia because I know where to find it on Wikipedia.
Yeah, I haven't really heard of anything in the U.S. I mean, nothing that's really made the news here, but yeah, it's been a weird situation, and it's crazy because it's causing a lot of fear. Like, actually, just as a side note, there was a hate crime in New York City. I think it was yesterday, where somebody of Asian descent wearing a face mask, just a normal, just like any normal person might. I mean, you see that all the time in different cities, people wearing face masks, or
Of
for whatever
course,
reason.
of
Yeah,
course,
it's
of
just
course.
says, it's cold season, it's flu
Yeah,
season. Some people are more sensitive than others, or more worried about it than others. And especially if you're going on the subway or something, maybe it wouldn't be such a big deal. But yeah, some lady was wearing one, and a guy came over and like screamed at her and called her bad names and said she was diseased. And he hit. And I don't get is he should be trying to get away from her. Instead, he attacked her. He hit her in the head, and then
I feel like
interestingly,
this was one of those lunatics, that
yeah,
have
yeah,
no ability to rationale their thoughts.
yeah. The big cities seem to have a lot of them, especially New York City, unfortunately, and especially
Yeah.
in the subway. So yeah, but interestingly, this lady didn't just take it like a victim. Like, she started following him probably to help get him apprehended, and then he like attacked her more, and
Hmm.
finally people kind of pried him off of her, and
I could probably find the
yeah,
story or something like that.
yeah. I mean, it was pretty nutty. But yeah, I mean, this is causing a lot of panic, and
And a lot of like I've heard about like a lot of like right. I already found it.
yeah, yeah. So this was the
Woman
dude that.
wearing a face mask attacked in a possible coronavirus hate crime. This is probably what you were
Yep,
referring to,
that's
right?
exactly the one. Yeah, and this is like,
Let's
and the crazy part is, because of the weird laws that changed in New York State, if like whatever this guy did wasn't considered a felony,
Oh my god.
it's quite possible that he could get released with no bail. They have a new weird rule in New York now that's getting like a bunch of people that did hate crimes lately released with no bail. Like, they don't even have to post bail anymore.
What is this? This is so stupid. Like,
Yeah,
what
but
are we
this is I mean
looking at?
this is
This
kind
is
of
so
normal for
stupid. Like, you can go
for New
and check
York a lot.
but like you can go and check the
Yeah.
map at the same time. Like, you can just always go and check the map, and from what I will quickly interrupt you right here. From what we can see from the Wikipedia, which is I base the Wikipedia credibility just because of the other countries outside of mainland China, because those reports are probably correct. So, okay, so the good news is that as of 8th of February 2020, we only have the two deaths outside of mainland China. So we have a death in Hong Kong, which was I can't remember who died in Hong Kong for certain, but I remember reading the story about the person who died in the Philippines. So it was a Chinese national who died in the Philippines, and I feel like he had a wife or a girlfriend with him in Philippines, and uh, don't quote me on this, but I feel like his girlfriend slash wife or something like that had the coronavirus, and I assume she got cured, but the man died. So because he contracted it from her, but like I could be off a little bit, so yeah, pardon me if I am.
Yeah, and that's interesting because that is sort of reminiscent of what we saw with SARS way back in, I can't remember what that was, like
2002.
2000. Yeah, yeah, where it seemed to mostly affect people in and I guess from um, like certain Asian countries like
Hmm.
China.
Yeah,
to
people of like
just
Asian descent for some reason, right?
yeah, yes, especially vulnerable. Not really sure why, but it was pretty fascinating. Yeah. So so it's interesting to kind of look into this and like because I feel like this for most people is the first time they've ever even heard that word coronavirus because you think like,
It
well,
was
what
the
is
first
that?
time
Is
for
that
me as well.
yeah, me too. It's like, well, what the heck is this? But then when you dig in and you start reading about it, it's interesting. So it's something kind of similar to the flu, and just it is important to note that for all the kind of panic around this, um, like the flu. I know this because I just was doing the research for this episode, and there was somebody on one of the YouTubes, or one of the news broadcasts mentioning that look, like in the United States alone,
Yeah.
something like 65,000 people are going to die from the flu. Just the normal flu.
Yeah.
Just every year, about that many die just from complications from the flu. You're old, or you're infirm, or you're too young, or
Or you have some
something.
sort of like pre-existing medical conditions.
Yeah, hits you the wrong way. Flu's pretty awful, and
Yeah.
just lays you out, and you're dead. Like I said, I think I mentioned to you offline. I had a coworker a long time ago, whose
Oh yeah.
fiance literally caught the flu on day one and died on day three.
God damn,
And yeah,
that's
it
insane.
was,
And she
and
was
this,
a fairly young woman, right?
yeah, healthy young woman in her 20s.
In her 20s. Wow.
Yeah, her early 20s. Yeah, and
Oh my
just
god.
boom, just done. So it just was like the wrong, it was
Jesus.
like winning the reverse lottery, right? So, yeah, it was just the wrong disease at the wrong time. So it is interesting. So apparently where it comes from is much like the flu. So there's a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel by a guy named Jared Diamond, who's a UCLA professor. And one of the things that's very interesting about the flu is humans didn't get flus and viruses until we started doing agriculture. And the reason for that is that, um, frankly, when we were all cave people running around picking berries and throwing spears at wild animals, we weren't really around a lot of animals other than the animals we killed. There's only animals we had contact with. And the fact was, animals in general, other than certain herd animals, like maybe certain kinds of herds of deer or herds of buffalo or
Yeah.
herds of cattle, where you do see diseases like anthrax and things like that, you didn't see a lot of animals really concentrated in one area. So it didn't really give viruses the chance
Yeah.
to multiply and kind of infect a lot of animals at once, but also to mutate. There wasn't a lot of mutation going on because the viruses, frankly, just weren't around enough of each other. They weren't running into enough immune systems, and they weren't like you wouldn't have like a deer and a squirrel and a cow and a bat all in the same square yard, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So these viruses never had a chance to really jump to other populations or other animal species because just they weren't, it wasn't happening enough. So what I think has changed is, you have these. First, you have humans doing agriculture where we're suddenly breeding and raising big mass amounts of, at first it was small herds of cattle, then bigger and bigger herds, and now we have factory farming. And then I think why you see things like this come out of places like China is China does something that you don't see as much in the US is China mixes in wild animals and like a wider variety of animals. So like in the US, we're probably pretty, and I would say for sure, like Europe, most of Europe, we're pretty picky eaters, really. Like we'll eat cows, we'll eat sheep, we'll eat pigs, we'll eat chickens, and maybe a couple other, like goat. Goat is not uncommon in some parts of the world. Goat is actually pretty good, by the way. Just thought I mentioned that. But like, what I mean? We don't really eat horse that often. Maybe we'll eat that, but like that's it. We're not eating bats. We're not eating like some of these other animals that like snakes
I
as
know where
much.
you're going with this. Yeah.
And it was interesting because actually one of my Facebook friends posted that there was this one animal. It's like the only scaled animal. See if I can find it. They think that she said that there's a lot of rumors going on, but she said that they'd actually traced the same virus to one that matches 99%. This other animal, it's like one of these weird scaled mammals that is actually pretty common in I wish I could find it now in Chinese food markets.
Right.
Yep, Chinese food markets, delicacy.
I
It's
mean,
kind of like
just
like a higher.
to
Yeah,
quickly like interrupt you, maybe we can find it right now because like according to the
yeah.
media report, besides seafood, items sold in the market included. By the way, I'm already talking about the Hunan seafood wholesale market that allegedly is the basically the spawning point of this virus. So allegedly, by reports, some of the I guess animal food products or animals being sold in this market included badgers, bats, beavers, camel, chickens, chouettes. I haven't heard about this before. Crabs, crocodiles, goddamn, dogs, damn, donkeys, metal cheese, some sort of a cheese, some fish, some foxes, some giant salamanders, hedgehogs, even herbs, koalas, goddamn, marmots, ostriches, otters, peacocks, pheasants, pigs, porcupines, rabbits, rats, sheep, shrimp, spices, spotted deer, stirred bass, turtles. Oh, okay, I just got it.
So
Turtles.
there it is. It's
Let
the
me just
pangolin.
get it.
Yeah,
1 second.
yeah. It's I sent you a link to it.
Yep.
It's a USA Today video. Yeah, pangolin. So at first they thought that was the bats because bats. So interestingly,
I'm just
bats.
gonna quickly
This isn't
show it for our
this isn't the
audience.
first time. The first time bats have been the bad guys because bats are also suspected for Ebola and of course for rabies. They think that here's something interesting I learned on Rogan's show the other day.
So these are
Um,
wait just to quickly
yeah.
interrupt you. These what am I seeing at? These are bats.
It's no. This is called a pangolin. So
Oh,
you know
it's a
they
pangolin. Okay.
yeah. So it's a weird scaled mammal. It's like the only scaled mammal. And so they thought it was bats, but then it turns out oh no, pangolins are
Oh,
also
so the penguins were the culprit.
potentially yeah. I
Okay.
mean so the hard part is it could be like more than one, right? It could be that you had the bats next to the penguins, next to the badgers, next to God knows what, and then you get two or three of these viruses. They mutate, they combine, and all of a sudden they're up somebody's nose and giving them the virus. You know what I mean? It jumps to the human population. That's what I think is kind of the big lesson to be learned.
I've never heard about of a pangolin before in my life.
Yeah, it's one of those weird animals. Apparently, it's some kind of delicacy.
It doesn't
So
look like a delicacy to me, man.
okay, yeah. I mean, they certainly like to eat a lot of stuff. I mean, I guess I'm snickering, but to be fair, it is hard for the rest of the world to get enough protein.
Of
Um,
course. Oh yeah.
so yeah,
Especially for China.
yeah, especially for China with 1 billion people. I mean, you can only have so many huge factory farms and stuff before it starts to outrace like
Yeah.
the economics and people obviously, especially in some parts of China, are really really poor, where they wouldn't necessarily be able to afford like
Yeah.
the kind of cows.
That's definitely unfortunate. Have you heard about like the fact that a lot of Chinese people are actually ordering like milk powder for their kids because there's like once again, don't quote me on this one, but there's like either there's not enough milk or milk is like quite expensive in China, but like I've heard something about milk powder being sold and consumed by the Chinese populace quite heavily, but I'm not sure how credible this information is, but like I've just heard from like other YouTube videos and from some research that there's something with like milk powder.
I haven't run into that, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's just trying to get any kind of like protein too, right? Some kind of healthy thing.
So yeah,
It's interesting because lactose, a large percentage of the population in China and some of the other countries around there are actually lactose intolerant. But I guess
Yeah.
when you need to do what you need to do to get protein.
So
That was actually
Yeah,
Yeah.
just a quick interruption. We can look at the image right now and see like a pangolin in a wildlife market. Now, this image is from Myanmar, so not from China, but like we can sort of get a general sense of how these, animals are being sold. And, just to quickly give my 2 cents. I know people need to survive, they need to eat, but it just seems a little cruel to me. But this is just my 2 cents. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can see right there, like, so imagine, like you said, that's Myanmar, and it's a smaller market. But imagine like a huge market meant to serve like a metropolitan area or a couple metropolitan areas, and just packed with like different animals like that, all breathing in each other's faces, or
Goddamn.
or recently killed. And yeah, the viruses are like, hey, that never happened to us before. I never was, that pangolin virus is like, hey, I was never near a bat virus. I was never near a cow virus. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's just a lot of opportunity for things to mutate. And in fact, they think that here in North America and Central America and South America, so in the quote unquote New World, um, when the Spanish and then the other Europeans landed, they think that something like 99% of the native population, by native I mean the American,
Yeah.
Aboriginal inhabitants, the folks that came over from the Siberian land bridge 10,000 plus years ago,
Mm-hmm.
they think that 99% of them died from literally the flu. That because
Yeah.
they did not have that kind of agriculture and
And the immune
animal
systems have not
husbandry.
been developed yet. Yeah.
Yep, no resistance to it. And
Exactly.
yeah, like the first time you catch the flu and the last time you catch the flu.
Right.
So
I just
so
yeah.
yep.
I was just going to quickly, talk about the map really quickly, just to
Yeah.
mention the fact because I'm checking this map every day, and this is like the information as of February 8th. Yeah, so in Lithuania we had a case where there was this man who had recently traveled back from Germany, and he allegedly spoke with some Chinese business partners in Germany, and then he drove back to Lithuania, and yeah, he essentially reported to the local hospital, and he stated that he feels sick, and he may suspect that this is the coronavirus just because he spoke to like a Chinese national in Germany. So this is how crazy this got, because this is the winter season, people are getting colds all the time. So you could just sort of imagine how much of these like little scares are happening around the world, from people just like speaking with a person from Asian descent, and then
Yeah, yeah.
getting a normal cold that they would have gotten either way, and then they suspect that they have the coronavirus. So it was a huge news here in Lithuania, and this man was quarantined actually in my city, in the local hospital in my city. He had been quarantined, I believe, for like a week, but then his, I guess, regular cold symptoms like sort of passed away, and he it was back to normal. So from this map, I remember seeing this map like a good 4 or 5 days ago, where Lithuania is on the map. I remember Lithuania was marked blue, and now it's grayed out again. I also have some friends in Slovakia, so in this country right here, and they also had like similar reports of people like speaking, I think, with like Chinese nationals and feeling sick the other day and reporting to the hospital. Now the scary thing about it, but they obviously turned out not to be the coronaviruses. The scary thing about this map is I'm looking at Poland right now, and Poland has been blue for what's been like, I feel like over a week, maybe 2 weeks. So I'm not sure what's going on in Poland. So Poland is in pretty close proximity. So yeah, that's just
Yeah,
my 2 cents on this whole map. Yeah. So yeah, that
it's a
this is
little
all
bit.
I wanted to mention.
Well, you make a good point, because I mean, now you are seeing people from different Asian populations and in countries that aren't China, complaining because saying, hey, like this is hysteria, and you're discriminating against us. I mean, look, that lady in the New York subway, case in point. Yeah, that guy was some nut, but
He
like
was he
like
was insane.
he was insane. But he's that idea in his head didn't come from nowhere. He's been watching the news or talking to people, and then started to
Probably
dwell and
on Facebook
ruminate
or
on this.
something. Probably
Yeah,
some
yeah,
misinformation or something.
a rumor. Yeah, but I have seen there's some backlash from like, let's say, Chinese American people and other people, other Chinese expatriate populations, where they're like, hey, like this, we would appreciate not being treated like we're carrying the plague. It would be like, when the Ebola stuff was coming on, was happening
Yeah.
a couple of years ago. I mean, if people started treating everybody that looked like they were from Africa, whether or not, I mean, there could be someone that looked like they were from Africa because they had African ancestry, but nobody in their family had been in Africa in 300 years, let's say, and that, they would rightfully have a reason to complain if people were saying, oh, don't give
Yeah.
me the plague. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. There's like, Chinese Americans whose families haven't been in China in like 200 years, so
Right.
they don't really appreciate being treated.
I
Yes.
have
Anyways, case of,
I
yeah.
have a quick question for you about the Ebola virus. Now, Ebola happened. Man, when did the outbreak happen? I'm trying to find the.
Well, there
It
was,
it, it happens on a fairly regular
yeah,
basis, I assume. But there was this one time where it was really really big. I cannot tell you the. Maybe it was
it was.
2013 I feel like it could have been somewhere around that.
It's been the past couple of years. So I would say from like 2016 to 2018, there were a bunch of outbreaks, and so
Yeah.
that's another interesting one because that once again,
I
that
had
one,
like a question about it for you
yeah.
actually because like when the big outbreak of Ebola happened, I'm not sure if I was too young or I was like in school and I just didn't care that much at that point. The Ebola was the Ebola outbreak as why as much of a concern as is the coronavirus in your opinion, because you have been an adult for a longer time than I have and you have been following these news for a lot longer than I have. So was it the same reaction? Was it like the same threat level that you felt from the Ebola, or is this a whole other animal, the coronavirus?
So yes and no. Yes, because Ebola has been on the radar for a good, I would say probably 30 plus years. There was a book that came out in the 90s called The Hot Zone that was talking about how there was a scare where there were some laboratory monkeys, I think in Florida, that got out of a testing lab, and they thought maybe they had Ebola. It turned out to be a version of the virus, I think, that only affected monkeys, not humans. Thank goodness. It wasn't all primates. It was just that specific primate.
Hmm.
But the big worry has always been that Ebola is one of those diseases. I forget. There's like something like a 5-tier level, and Ebola is super scary because um, it it's highly contagious. It's contagious through body fluids. I think direct contact. I don't think it's contagious through the air, thank goodness. But and they think maybe it comes from bats because it seems to happen in areas they're not entirely sure what the vector is. But like bats spread other things like rabies. Like something like 10% of all bats in British
Hmm.
Columbia have rabies. I think in the city metropolitan areas. Anyway, um, what's scary about Ebola is it kind of turns you into a big virus bomb. So you
Jeez.
go, yeah, you go, you start developing this fever, and you essentially hemorrhage inside, and then right before you die, literally like your body just craps out all this blood and bile and germs
God
out
damn.
out all your orifices. So you're vomiting, you're
Yeah.
defecating, you're everything out your nose, out your ears, out your butt, and of course, like that's just spreading germs everywhere. So anybody that touches that can potentially die, and it happens. Like doctors go over there, and they die from it too. Like they're trying to do something. Yeah. So
Uh,
I think the only thing about Ebola is it seems to happen. It seems to move faster. So like the thing that's scary about the coronavirus is
yeah.
it feels like it's a little slower acting, and that unfortunately somebody might be able to like
The incubation
go,
process is slower.
yeah, and get over here and be contagious and spreading it around for 24 or 48 hours and not know it, and all of a sudden everybody's getting sick. Unlike Ebola, where it's like it gets, I think in the first 24 hours or so, it gets really obvious that this person's about to like hemorrhage out and die. um,
Damn.
but even then, when that was happening, it was really obnoxious because I think it was Bill Burr or somebody, some comedian had a joke that it seemed like the first symptom of having Ebola was to get on a plane and go fly to another continent, because like it seemed like there were a lot of people that they were worried had Ebola that kept on ending up in an airport somewhere, and then obviously everybody would freak out and they'd have to lock it down and look at that person, and It was
Mm.
it's one of the biggest. I think before this coronavirus thing happened, that was the big boogeyman of like the virus that they
The
really
Ebola, right?
worried. Yeah, yeah, Ebola, way more than anything else. I think
I
way more than
ha,
smallpox. Yeah.
have you heard about like Madagascar and the fact that some of the local Madagascari population traditions sort of almost led towards the re-emergence of the bubonic plague. So yeah, so
No,
that
what was that? Yeah.
so in Madagascar they have like a tradition. Now it's a fairly interesting tradition. Now I'm not gonna like say anything like because I'm not too well informed about Madagascar and stuff like that. But they have a tradition where like they dance with dead bodies of like past people in their family that passed away. So they like dig out like the bodies that were buried, and they have like some sort of a traditional dancing thing. So it's all tradition in there, but like the bad thing about that is that those corpses dug out from the ground, they actually have the potential to spread the bubonic plague, which, if I'm not mistaken, was the actual plague that hit like Europe back
Yeah.
in the Dark Ages. So yeah, there was like this whole scare in Madagascar that the bubonic plague might come back, and I feel like the local government did something about it. So I feel like it was only happening in like really rural areas, obviously not in the whole of Madagascar, not in the whole country. It's a fairly sizable country. So yeah, like you have like all of these scares around the world, but the coronavirus, just from a standpoint of being just a genome, a virus, never hit my radar. And yeah, now it had, now it has definitely, right?
So,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
I know we wanted to get into some of the more salacious stuff. Before we do,
Oh
I
yeah.
want to just I have way too much research here, but I don't think it's worth talking about every single little thing, except that it is interesting that like what we're talking about today is one coronavirus. Turns out that, like most colds are actually coronaviruses. They're just it's the name corona has to do with the shape of parts of the virus where like it looks like a crown. That's what corona means. So
Oh
there's
yeah.
like these little pieces that
These red
kind of,
ones that we can
yeah, it's
see.
little red things, and
Yeah.
I think depending on like the resolution of the microscope they were using,
Hmm.
sometimes it looked a little more crowny than others. But yeah, it's just something about a shape. I mean, the main thing is that it can cause colds with major symptoms. So fever, swollen adenoids,
Yeah.
pneumonia. It can, it's a kind of those are obnoxious things that seem to happen every fall and winter,
Hmm.
and people get sick, and it's just one of those things. It's just unfortunately what they're running into right now seems like an especially scary and at least in certain populations potentially fatal virus. So that's I think where there's the difference and why we're calling something that I think the name of it is 2019 NCOV. Is how they're designating
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
correct.
yeah. It is worth noting that there was a doctor that in Wuhan. His name is Li Wenliang, and he he was until recently alive and trying to help. What happened was it was interesting. He actually blew the whistle early on this, and this is one of those examples. I think one of the big criticisms about China is that sometimes the local officials are somewhat corrupt or incompetent, and you've seen this pattern before with other things. Like um, what will happen often is that someone will mess up on the local level, either just because they don't know what they're doing, or they're stealing, or they're corrupt, or whatever it is, and then the problem will get worse. Whatever the problem is, it could be corruption, it could be theft, it could be, in this case, a big disease outbreak, and then finally on the federal level. So by federal, I mean like kind of the higher government level in China,
Beijing,
like
essentially.
yeah, Beijing, they'll say, hey, like we're not messing around, like we're going to shoot people if you don't fix this now. So and they do actually shoot people. So that's what happened is this guy was actually vindicated. So he blew the whistle, and Wuhan told him to shut up. The Wuhan government told him to shut up, and you don't know what you're talking about, and kind of tried to cover it up. And we were kind of worried, I guess it was going to make them look bad or cause some kind of big panic, which it did cause a panic, but maybe rightfully so. And here's what's interesting is he, has been treating people with the virus, and he has since died from the virus.
Yeah.
So the hero
has passed away.
has passed away, and this is interesting because there's, I think you and I, when we were talking about whether we were going to cover this topic, there's a movie called Contagion, and there's literally a scene just like this in the movie. So in the movie, the virus comes from China. The spoiler, the movie's like,
man, why you had to spoil it?
I got it. 9 years old. 9 years old. It's if you didn't watch it, too late. You find out at the very end of the movie, it shows like a bat, like dropping a poop into like a pig pen, and that's how it got into the food chain. So that was, but in the movie, there's this lady who's a doctor who is like she's trying to treat people kind of at like the epicenter of where all this is going on, and all of a sudden she starts sneezing and gets a fever, and she knows it. She knows that she's got it, so here she was being the hero and going into the danger zone, and then she dies from it, like in the movie.
This lady right here, I assume.
I think it might have been her. Yeah, it was somebody where like, she goes in there and she's trying to help things and fix stuff, and just dies from it like 2 days later, just like this poor guy.
Man, that's exactly how it happened with this man, Li Jing Sen, something like that. Let me just get
Li Wenliang I have here.
Yeah.
So he was. I mean, literally, he was being touted until like yesterday that he was the guy who had found it.
Li Wenliang. I'm really hoping I pronounced his name again. Correctly. So a coronavirus death of Wuhan doctor sparks anger. So, the death of a Chinese doctor who tried to warn about the coronavirus outbreak has sparked widespread public anger and grief in China. Li Wenliang died after contracting the virus while treating patients in Wuhan. So, this shows that I heard about this news story like when it happened, because it was on my feed. I believe it was like yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. On the 7th of February, and for me it was crazy. It just showed me that because doctors are usually the most healthy people in the society, so he was a fairly young man and he died from this virus. So this shows that not only elderly people and people with pre-existing medical conditions are affected greatly, but also healthy people like Li Wenliang.
Best of the best. So I think that at this point, you and I have some juicy rumors to cover, and actually I have an additional one about Tencent. Why don't I lead off with that one, just because that one was kind of juicy and it was the latest news, and then we can get into the ones that you told me about that I think probably the media here has been hiding from us because they don't want us to get even more crazy here in the U.S. So the one I saw yesterday was that the company Tencent. Have you heard of them before?
I feel like I heard, but
they're like a Chinese gaming company, I think, like, or something.
Tencent, just Tencent.
I think so. Yeah, that's a good question.
Multinational conglomerate company.
Yeah, Tencent. So they had some kind of like news feed that which was just like the chart you and I were looking at, but it was like their own total. And what was kind of scary and weird was, for like a little while, that number that we were looking at that was like the total number of people infected. Mm-hmm. They were saying, the 30-something thousand. They were saying that was the deaths.
Oh, whoa!
And then all of a sudden they changed it, and they're like, sorry, we got that confused. But apparently they've done this a couple times now, where they've said they keep on like accidentally, quote unquote, like mixing up the dead with the infected, and that's what gets into one of the first rumors about this, is that China. There's been like so of course everything's rumor, right? Everything's like you have the kind of like China's been clamping down really hard. Yeah, well, it's like because China went from like not taking this seriously at all to taking this more seriously than even like a revolution. Like they are literally nailing boards across people's doors, boarding
Uh,
them into their
building
houses.
building 10,000 like bed hospitals in like a week.
Yeah. And then also eerily building maybe a giant crematorium. Yeah,
Mm,
but also like literally dumping like huge mounds of dirt in front of doors so people can't get out of the apartment building.
wait,
Um,
is this because I've not been informed about this? This is wild.
yeah, they're putting like steel beams across doorways so people can't get out of their apartments so
So
that
how do they get food then?
it's a good question. I assume maybe they're using balconies or something to get food to people. Somehow they're getting. I mean, they're not starving people in officially. What's crazy is, as I understand it, that's exactly what they used to do back in, like you said, the
Whoa.
bubonic plague days. Supposedly, in the plague days, when people would hear people coughing inside their house, like when the plague was going on, they would just nail boards across their doors and like I said, kind of starve them in there
Mm,
with it. So, but yeah, they're setting up checkpoints. They're shooting people or at least arresting people that try to
shoot.
violate those checkpoints. So I've seen videos on different outlets of like,
Right.
there'll always be some dummy that won't listen. Oh, I know better. And like I saw one where some lady was trying to get in a screaming fight with the cops, and they're like, "Get the hell in this police car!" Like they just, it was like all they could do to not beat the crap out of her in front of the camera,
Yeah.
and then the next thing you see is her shackled to a table, kind of screaming at a judge or something, and they're like, "Yeah, no,
Mm,
but there's another video of a lady who actually got shot. She tried to somehow go past the checkpoint, and they told her no, and she said yes, and they said, well, now you're dead, and
Jesus Christ.
yeah, so they're taking it super seriously now. But yeah, there's rumors. There was one rumor that said
Hmm.
that they were cremating 100 bodies a day and couldn't do it fast enough. There was another hospital worker that claimed to show video of just stacks of bodies and body bags at the hospital. So that kind of points more to the 10 cent number and not
Uh,
the
I
not the kind of
mean, from
official numbers, Sam,
yeah,
right?
just to quickly give my take on what I've gathered. So, first of all, I want to give a lot of credit to a YouTube channel as well as a podcaster and just in general a cryptocurrency expert from Box Mining. So I'm not certain who the person was that uh, I can't state his name right now, but there's this YouTube channel called Box Mining, and they're currently doing almost like daily updates on the coronavirus, and they're doing actually really good work with giving the correct information to the public. And also, they have this Box Mining website that I actually look through every once in a while because they have been covering this pretty much. Situation in depth, so you can see like the table of contents is pretty serious. Right, and from what I've gathered from this basically YouTube channel and boxmining.com website is that pretty much to base the real numbers of infected cases and deaths, you pretty much have to use a 10x multiplier. So if, for say, we are currently looking at 35k infected and 700 something around that death, so we should be applying a 10x multiplier to those numbers. So that would actually lead us with 350,000 people infected and over 7,000 people killed. Now, why this actually makes sense is the fact that there are reports, especially from Wuhan, that there is a shortage of test kits because I assume you need individual test kits to test for the coronavirus. So people are not getting tested because of the shortage of test kits, meaning that when they die from the coronavirus, if they have it and they were not tested, their death and their infection won't show up on the overall numbers. So there are people allegedly dying in the streets, dying in their home, waiting for help, waiting for someone to test them, waiting in hospitals as well, just in lines because obviously the hospitals are packed fully. So these people are dying all the time without actually getting tested. Now that means that the reports are not, they're not accurate because people are dying without getting tested. So if a person just dies, you know, I guess he does not end up on the official number. So going by that logic, the numbers could actually be a lot bigger now. If the numbers are like 350,000 people infected and over 7,000 deaths, now this is a huge crisis because actually a coworker of mine, actually my boss, he actually had a good, because he's a very business minded person and he has been dealing with Chinese imports and exports for like over 20 years almost now. So he said to me that there would be not much sense to actually like barricade entire 11 million population cities just because of like when it was back in the day, it was like 2000 cases of infections, to like have this huge crisis in China and just stop all economic activities for 2000 people infected. That would not make much sense. So he rationalized the fact that he thinks that the situation is probably the infections are in the hundreds of thousands because economically it just would not make sense to like lock off entire cities for just a handful of infections.
That makes sense. I mean, that you're right. It's a massive economic impact to them, and
It's
and
crazy.
and they're literally. I mean, he's not joking. It's like more than 55 million people that are quarantined right now. Like just one province, Hubei, is 55 million people that they have quarantined right now. So
Yeah.
it's probably in reality even bigger. Yeah, yeah. It's like this is a disaster already. This is an economic disaster for them. And people they're not having funerals, so they're doing cremations. What would be crazy is I've seen videos where these cities are like ghost towns right now because everybody is trapped in their house
Yeah.
under quarantine, just under the like the cremation thing, because you have to do something with these bodies. You can't just let them sit. Obviously, they're not getting treated at the mortuary or anything. I wonder if you could check on satellite photos, or the CIA is looking for this. I'm sure they are, to see if there's like smoke plumes.
Just
Just you
just
know
a
what I mean?
really quick interruption because I almost forgot. I wanted to talk with you about this because I just found this out on the spot. Look at the Google Earth right now. This is Google Earth updated for like today, so 8th of February. Look at this blur. Like
Oh yeah.
I have not checked this thing yesterday, or like ever. Like this is the first time I'm searching for Wuhan, South China seafood wholesale market on like just essentially on the Google Earth for the first time. And like, is this a glitch? Because come on, man.
Yeah, that seems weird. Just that
We
one.
have Wuhan, but like
Yeah.
just the area around Wuhan is completely blurred. And just in general, yeah, Wuhan center is blurred. We have like,
Yeah.
I feel like these are like the images that had like the 3D 3D like rendering situation right here. And yeah, why are are they blurred? Like I feel like if this was a glitch, we should not even be seeing these 3D models. If we are seeing these 3D models right now, by my logic, this was viewable. It had to be. They just didn't put like all of this work in creating these like 3D models, especially for like a bridge, and then messing up with like the blurriness. Like this just okay. So right off the bat, this is a red flag that some tampering with the Google Earth footage has been done.
This is weird. Yeah. I'll have to check on my side when I get
Yeah,
back to
please
back
do.
to my client that has it. Yeah, because I'll just see if I'm seeing the same thing. So then, the other interesting thing was, I'd only been hearing kind of one note, let's say, out of the media here in the U.S., and it was mostly around the kind of stuff we talked about. But then when you and I were talking about this stuff a week ago, you had some fascinating theories that
Oh yeah.
for some reason I had gotten not a single whiff of, and I don't know
It's
if
it's
that's a,
it's
you know what I
regional. It's
mean?
regional, man. It's regional.
Yeah, but it was actually pretty interesting stuff. And we'll do a little disclaimer that we're not Russian bots or spies. We're not here to help, cause panic or
Just
spread
stating
lie.
the
Yeah,
facts. Just stating
yeah,
the
just
facts
yeah,
from the
just
media that I've consumed over the
right,
past few weeks.
right.
So right. So what we are referring to is the fact that um, uh, it's basically here in Lithuania, we got reports basically from the Lithuanian media that pretty much reports on what's happening in Russia, because we are pretty much neighbors with Russia. We have a border, so in the Russian media, like the pro-state media, because let's be honest here, the current media in Russia is pro pro Russian state. I mean, this is pretty obvious. We don't have to say that this is not like this is like a conspiracy as well. This is pretty much not a conspiracy. Everyone knows it. So the Russian media actually had like some sort of I guess articles, as well as on the news some statements made that they believe, at least like some sort of Russian intelligence people believe, that the Americans or the American state has sort of implanted this disease, the coronavirus, into China, just to essentially cripple the Chinese economy and gain back some sort of economic dominance over China, regarding the whole trade war thing with the President Trump had sort of initiated a little bit with China. So this is like something that the Russian media had ran with, that the Americans had implanted the virus as sort of a biological weapon against China. So like, this is all, I'm just stating what I've heard. So I don't have any opinion on this. Like, what is your opinion on this theory?
I mean, it would make a pretty good movie plot, right? It is kind of like, I guess it's pretty interesting. And I actually, compared to this, a couple of the other ones that we're going to talk about, I guess some of the I could see if I were like in Russia, let's say, and the state media told me that, I might think, well, yeah, like it makes sense. Like it's a big regional competitor, and true enough, like China themselves have been pretty aggressive in the past. I would say like 15 years, especially. So like they've always been a regional competitor, and at one point they were our enemy. Basically between the Communist Revolution and then when Nixon finally went over there and made friends with them again. But yeah, I mean they essentially
Yeah.
all of our manufacturing base went there. They they basically forced down one of our spy planes. Right before 9/11, we had a big. Right before 9/11, it kind of looked like we were heading towards a war at some point, because they were doing a lot of aggressive stuff. And then ever since then, especially in recent years, they've been not just bumping heads with us, but with everyone else that's their neighbor. So they've been taking over. They've been building islands in places where there weren't islands, and saying, "Oh, now it's now it's ours because we have a base here." They've been taking
Hmm.
over resources. They've been expanding. They've been spending much more on military than they usually do. They're still way below us in the U.S.,
Like
but
6 times or 5 times, something around that.
yeah, but for them, it's way more spending than they used to do, and given Russia, for all their saber rattling, isn't really a threat anymore. I mean, other than their nuclear stockpile, Russia can barely afford to pay for the weapons they have.
I mean,
But
Russia just has a region, just a quick comment on my end.
yeah,
Russia, obviously, for the United States, it's not a a big threat besides the fact of the nuclear weapons. But for people here in Europe,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Russia is definitely a big time player. Russia is, demands like respect, and yeah, Russia has a situation where it definitely it has a lot of power to basically export. Like they have like power projection in Europe, in Central Asia, in the
Right.
Middle East. It's pretty sizable, but yeah, in the grand
So
scheme of globally, then yeah, it's not as big of a threat for the United States as China is. You're right.
yeah, I mean, sometimes we'll have to go into that. I actually have my own conspiracy theory that some of the power projection that Russia is doing, we've actually tricked them into doing to wear them down. Because it's
Mm,
expensive, right? So leaving the war in Ukraine and the separatist republics, or the stuff in Syria,
yeah.
all that stuff like is kind of like running up big bills. So I kind of have a theory sometimes that Obama kind of tricked them into doing that, but we'll see.
Mm,
We'll see how that actually ends up. And
mhm.
of course makes them look bad as well. So China,
Yeah,
yeah, but
it
China
definitely does. Yeah.
China hasn't really been fooled into doing that, but yeah, they've been doing a lot of things. They're fighting with neighbors like Vietnam. They're fighting with neighbors like um, Japan, and they're
The whole
yeah,
South China Sea situation with the
yeah,
island building and the whole
all
situation right
that.
there. Yeah, it's a pretty serious
So
thing.
so it's fairly plausible. I think the only thing I would wonder is if you were suppose you were like, let's say the CIA did that or something,
Mm.
with American military. How do you keep it from boomerang against us? So like you'd have to be really sure. I mean, it would be kind of almost a racist thing, right? Because you'd have to say, okay, we're going to unleash a bioweapon that we think will
Yeah.
only affect people from this ancestry, which is a relatively small amount of the U.S. population, but it's still a danger to our own citizens, both from that ancestry and then everyone else in general. But yeah, you'd have to be pretty sure that it wasn't going to come here and cause a lot of, because obviously, like, if somehow that fire gets out of control, it burns down everything else. So I guess that's my one bone to pick with that theory.
So, for me personally, when I heard about that theory, I wasn't really sure about how credible it was because it came from the Russian state media that pretty much usually jumps on these situations where they can just report things that pretty much makes the Russian government, the Russian state as a whole, look good in the public eyes of the Russians, because Russian media doesn't really transcend borders. Besides, like the Russia Today. Russia Today seems to have a huge following. I'm not sure how they managed to do that, but like Russia Today is actually a pretty big news outlet. So yep, personally, just to quickly give my 2 cents, I don't buy it. I don't think the United States had released a virus into China. I just don't think anyone wants these issues. It's really crazy. Personally, for me, I just don't have enough proof. Yeah, so that's out of the way. Now another theory that I've read in Reddit, and it's not a theory that has been published anywhere by credible news outlets. It's just a quick food for thought, and we can definitely jump past this one because it's really like sinister and really crazy. Is the theory that the Chinese government did this on purpose, essentially to lower the population of elderly people in China because the pension situation in China is difficult. An aging society a little bit in China now, and the pension's gonna be crazy. So they they want to like I don't know, lower the elder Chinese population. Now this sounds straight up like terrorist state like, so definitely not sure about this theory's credibility. What is your take on this?
Yeah, so that was another interesting one because yeah, the one child policy, like China, China made the one child policy kind of like just really based on like a presentation they heard many decades ago.
For real?
Some guy gave it. Yeah, yeah. It's weird. There's actually a Freakonomics podcast on this where there was like a conference and it was about population, and somebody gave like just like any kind of conference, people present different ideas, right? They don't really expect a whole nation to act on it and you
Yeah.
know do this. So like yeah, this guy, I can't remember if he was a U.S. guy or European guy. He is some academic gives a thing,
Hmm.
and he's like, oh well, maybe the thing to do is just to limit everybody to one child, and like there's some high ranking person from China there, that the mainland China, People's Republic, and they're like, oh, you know what, that's a pretty cool idea. Let's just talk to you about this a little more, and next thing you know, they're implementing the one child policy, and it was never perfect. Like for sure, there were people that had more than one child, and
And
sometimes
you heard like the reason why the main reason, at least in my eyes, why it was a really really bad decision. It was the fact that whenever a person, since it's a one child policy, you want that one child to pretty much be, have the best chance of providing for you when you're pretty much in your elder years. So whenever a female was born, a girl, was born, and back then in China, it was a lot harder for a female to make it in the world than for a man. These little girl babies, little females, they were pretty much, killed essentially. Just
yeah,
they were,
female.
yeah, they were like trying to have boys instead. So that's really heavy to think about,
Yeah,
and it was a bad decision in my eyes.
yeah, actually, so here's an interesting to think about. So there were two reasons then because of this that China, under this one rumor, this
Yeah.
one theory, why maybe China would have done this then. So yeah, so like the first thing you mentioned, female infanticide and selective abortions that are biased
Hmm.
in favor of having boys,
Yes.
because like I said, between that, just things you mentioned and just kind of a cultural prejudice
Yes.
for having boys. Um, yeah, so here's the issue is that you end up with right now both China and India has this problem too.
Yeah, I heard.
Even though the selective abortion is supposedly illegal, it still happens. So and the infanticide, same thing. So what you end up with is right now in both countries, respectively, you have 1 million excess men to women, and like the thing is without things like this happening,
Hmm. Yeah.
human populations generally like if just there's no controls, just people having babies. Generally, there's actually more boys than girls, because over time, boys tend to do things that get themselves killed. Men do
So
riskier
there
things,
are
riskier
more
jobs.
more girls than boys overall.
But by the end, yeah. By the time it's old people time,
Yeah.
women live longer in general anyway
Yeah.
than
Of
men.
course. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but men also do things, whether it's occupation or whether it's just
Yeah.
dumb stuff that gets them killed. So yeah. But unfortunately, this biased it even more in favor of males. So yeah, what happens is when you have 1 million extra men who have
Yes.
no chance of ever getting a wife, and with the assumption that they do want a wife, it's very dangerous for the society. It's actually caused massive destabilization. They think it's part of the reason for some of the unrest in other parts of the world. And I have a little pet theory. I have a worry sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes I worry. This is going to sound crazy. Sometimes I worry that China and India, who have gone to war before, like kind of small border skirmishes and things, because they share a border.
Oh yeah,
Some,
the one where they threw rocks at each other.
yeah, I mean, or rockets, or they throw rockets, or there's actually like. So here's what I worry is that those two countries will either get drawn into a war, or will use a war like that to basically
Hmm.
kill off their excess population. So yeah, under this theory, well, why not just use a virus to
Just
do it instead?
yeah, maybe a virus, but just a quick touch
Yeah.
on this theory. You know, I like watching different like YouTube videos on like geopolitics and stuff like that. There's this YouTube channel, Caspian Report. It's an excellent channel. A Azerbaijani political expert makes videos on that channel and pretty much gives a breakdown of like geopolitics in different states. So because the border between India and China is so rough, because the like around that. Tibet area. There is like just mountainous regions. So
Himalayas, yeah.
yeah, so basically land war is like soldier land war is pretty much not an option because the transportation is just impossible for people to transport soldiers and things like that. So there's no way to fight between India and China just by land wars. So
Yeah, it would
maybe
have to be Air
biological
Force and
weapons are an option.
nuclear. Yeah, it
Yeah.
would have to be something like that. Well, here's the other thing is with here's a strange fact about China. China has something like 70,000 riots a year, which is sounds like a crazy high number, right? Until
Hmm.
you realize it's a billion people. But 70,000 riots is not nothing, and that's in a country that's supposedly relatively stable. So I feel like just from once I said some of the stuff we talked about, that's a worry. And then to your point, because they made such a big downshift in what they call fertility, really, in terms of the number of children people can have because of the rules. Um, the age cohorts. So like the numbers of people at
Hmm.
different age groups are very unbalanced, and they
Oh, you
they
you you send me those
yes,
infographics.
and that picture, yeah. So there's like it's kind of like an inverted pyramid, and part of the worry is that I mean we hear this too in this country, and you hear this in other countries. That's why they justify immigration, that they need immigration because they need more people at the bottom, because essentially most countries have negative population growth right now in at least like Europe and North America.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, the issue is you may not have enough people paying taxes at the younger ages to pay for the benefits of the older people, and
Exactly, exactly.
that's a major problem. I mean, Japan really has this problem right now
Japan,
because they
yeah,
have,
yep, 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 yep.
yeah. Russia also interesting. So that was one of my kind of things about whether if we tricked Russia
Right.
into attacking
Well,
and running up the bills,
I'm not
and
sure.
then
I'm not sure if you heard about this recent Russian government policy of, I guess, increasing the age for pensions. So it used to be 60. So it was very low, at least in my eyes. Like the retirement age at 60, at least here in Europe, it's usually around 65. So they actually increased it from 60 to 65 in Russia, the pension age. And there was a huge backlash against the government, and it was a huge hit to the popularity of President Vladimir Putin. But yeah, so this is basically the main reason why he got a lot of backlash, because a lot of people, in their early to like mid 50s to like late 50s, that are expecting to retire pretty soon. Now they're hit with this new policy, which will make them stay in the workforce for another, like extra 5 years. So that was like a thing in Russia as well, where they need the money, and they need the workforce to work longer, and they need the less, and they need essentially less people to pay pensions to. So that's how they handle that situation.
yeah, we'll see. I wonder if it'll work. So yeah, I mean, so under that theory, I guess with China, just the theory that like they unleash this virus and it kills off a bunch of people. Um, Gosh, if that was their theory,
To me, it's not a viable theory,
yeah,
like, who would take this risk? China is in an upward track, as as of late. It was always had that increase in economy, and to take this massive economic hit just to have some more money to spend on pensions. I mean, it is essentially would destabilize the whole country. And man, no, 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 I don't think it's credible, because like the the local government, they're fairly strategic about their work, the CCP. So I don't think it's a viable strategic move. So it's just a
Yeah.
theory that I found on Reddit. So I don't think we need to
Let's
pay much more time to it. I feel like it's not credible at all.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it just and almost to your boss's point, like it just seems like it would have been so destructive. This is at this point, this is about as destructive as a nuclear attack
Exactly.
on like their own people. Yeah, so no, that's a good point. So then there was the third one, and the third one that you mentioned
Yeah.
actually started to sound very familiar to me
Okay.
from when I was growing up as a teenager in the '90s with HIV. So this go ahead with number three because that one has
Right.
has some parallels.
Right. So the number three theory that was on my radar was the fact that someone, not necessarily mentioning any state, any company, any organization, any like big pharma company or anything like that, or terrorist groups, not mentioning who did it, but somebody released the virus essentially globally to start selling pre-made vaccines, antidotes to the general populace and getting rich by doing so. So this is like the quick breakdown of the third theory that was on my radar, that somebody did it. May it be like a big pharmaceutical company from the US or Europe or something like that, or maybe a state, a terrorist state, or who knows, North Korea or something like that. Someone did this uh, in order to get rich off selling antidotes and vaccines after the virus pretty much goes viral, globally spreads. So this
Yeah,
is the third theory.
it's kind of funny because it is weird. Maybe a lot of the times these same theories go around because yeah, like I was saying when I was a teenager, so when I was a kid, like kind of
Yeah.
going into my tweens and my teens, HIV became like the big boogeyman, and it really like
Mm-hmm.
it really was like a specter over us. But yeah, I used to hear that. So like two of the three theories we talked about were almost exactly the same kind of thing we heard with HIV, where it used to be rumored that the CIA
Mm-hmm.
released HIV to reduce certain populations or do certain things, and then the same thing where it's like pharmaceuticals made HIV so they could sell us the cure. Unfortunately, here we are all this time later, and there's no cure yet, and even the
Yeah.
medications for it. The medications are actually being pirated now, so like they're not even really making that much money off the medications anymore. I don't think. Not like
I don't think they should, man. HIV
yeah,
has been for a long time. I think it should,
big mess.
yeah, it's a big mess. This was like around the time when Magic Johnson got HIV. I think that was like
Yeah.
a big thing in the United States as well.
Yeah, he was the big one. Him and it's still pretty amazing actually that because he caught it back when it would really pretty much kill you. So he must have got some amazing medical help or also.
Have you seen the South Park episode on HIV where the cure was money,
Oh,
just the stacks of money, where he
That's right.
would like sleep under like the
On
bed
money.
with like money,
Yeah.
and he had like money stacked in his room, and the cure was like big stacks of money.
It may be true. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What do you think about this theory? Because I mean, to me, I just feel like I don't know. There's no cure for the common cold yet, which I think would make way more money if they could just cure that. That would like I promise you, like all the big corporations of the world that lose money every fall and winter when everybody catches colds and flus.
Hmm.
If there was somebody, there was a company that could cure the cold right now, and this is basically like a really bad version of the cold. It's the same kind of thing,
Yeah,
coronavirus.
essentially,
It's
yeah.
like I think like the Walmarts of the world would beat a path to their door and drop $1 trillion on their doorstep for a cure so that they wouldn't lose all the productivity from people catching this stuff. I don't know. What do you think?
I think so. I think so. Like where I work, like people, take like days off as like on a regular basis during like the winter time, and people get sick all the time. And once you're sick, you can take and you go to the doctors. You get an actual, like the letter from the doctor that you are actually sick. You can take that to your employer, and essentially you get like 2 days. At least here in Lithuania, it's like if I'm not mistaken, it's like 3 days off for like 80% of the rate or something like that. Then it's like for like 60% and so on. So, and you can take these like essentially all the time. So you can like, you know, you can go to the doctors if you know what, you know, if you get sick, you just like take that letter from the doctor to your employer, and then that's it. You're like missing work for like a week for essentially the same amount of money. So you know, there's a little incentive to not do this, and there's actually a lot of people in Lithuania that are abusing this social structure, where they're just, you know, almost like pretend to have a cold, you know, just like that. So yeah, it would make sense. Like if a cure for a cold would come up, I could definitely see someone dropping $1 trillion on the patent, like easily, like even maybe even more than that, because a patent will last you like 20 years, and like the companies that the pharmaceutical companies that own the patents, they add like little updates to the patent, essentially prolonging the patent, because, you know, if you have a patent for 20 years, after 2 years you add something to it, then essentially it's a whole new patent for another 20 years or something like that. So, you know, you could just sort of like prolong the patents for forever. So I could
Yeah,
easily see people dropping a trillion or a few trillion actually on something like that.
yeah. I could just see literally the Fortune 500 companies like pooling their money, saying, "Look, we're just gonna forget the patent. We're just gonna buy it, and we're gonna give it away as cheap as pennies, just to every worker. We never want to see anybody get a cold again, because
Yeah.
we're going to make all that money back easily with productivity." Yeah, to your point, I mean, in the U.S. and a lot of companies, at least the full-time gigs I've had, yeah, you get at least five sick days a year where you get full pay. I'm sick, and you don't even need a doctor's note. Just I'm sick, I'm staying home today, and
Yeah.
they have to pay you, and that's it. Maybe you work from home anyway. Yeah, there's a lot of like kind of skating around with that. So yeah. So I don't know. That's my thought about that. I'm trying to think if there was anything else beyond this that we wanted to cover in the episode today. I feel like we've done a pretty good job of
Yep.
kind of covering the high notes here.
Yes, definitely. The high notes I feel like have been covered. I mean, I'm not sure if we're gonna be making more episode on the coronavirus. We were like discussing prior to recording the episode that if we might actually do an update episode down the line, maybe 2 weeks from now, when we have a lot more information and a lot more things have happened, essentially, if you're still alive. So yeah, I guess pretty much we covered everything we wanted to cover. I know that this episode was not from our usual thematic of crimes, UFOs, true crime based cases. Yeah, so we'll see what happens. By the way, we are, as of right now, scheduled to actually have 2 episodes this week, just because of that fact, because this episode is a little bit off track from our usual stuff. So yeah, catch us on episode 27 as well. We have a case lined up to do for, the same week, so 2 episodes this week. And yeah, any final touches before we sign out?
I'm just really happy to see the subscriber numbers jumping, especially even this past week. Thanks for listening. This is, like you said, a kind of a different kind of episode for us, a quick update. And so will the next one. So we love to see your comments and feedback. Thank you for listening. Please hit subscribe.
Exactly. Stay safe, guys, and we will catch you on episode 27. And peace out.